just first of all, so by way of introduction, I guess, and you all may know a little bit about me. I graduated in 1981 from Penn State's AE program. Going back a little further in time, when I was thinking about where to go to school, to be honest, to sort of be frank, Penn State at that moment in the 70s, mid-70s, was not my first choice. I really wanted to study architecture. And so I had other schools that I thought were, higher on my list, and found myself thinking, well, the ones I really wanted to go to, only took a few students a year, and it wasn't in the cards for me. So in a way, I looked at the AE program as, not my first choice, right? Not my last choice, but not my first choice. And so I started that way, and I started the program with a particular goal. And I went to everybody and said, if I do this program, can I be an architect? So right from 1976, I wanted to be an architect. That was my overall goal. But I had an inkling that, studying architecture and engineering, or an integrated version in architectural engineering, was a good thing. And I just didn't quite get it entirely yet. But I was told, yeah, you can graduate from this program and you can get licensed as an architect, you can get licensed as an engineer. There's some who've done both. So there's a lot of flexibility. So I went into the program really thinking, I don't know how this is going to play out. I've got 5 years in this program, and it's going to be very interesting. But I like the idea that my options are open, and that it's taking an approach to architecture that I felt was important, which is, really get to understand the systems and the buildings that we're doing, buildings and spaces that we're doing, know how to do those, whether I really practiced it or not. So whichever, in the end, once I graduated, whichever path I took, I felt like this is going to be really good to have. So that was the little promo, I guess, to add for AE. But I through the program, I began to realize just how great it was, and firmly believe that to this day. So I'll tell you, I'm 61. I've been doing this for 39 years. A lot of time in it. And I continue to look back and think that the core of this program still suits me to this day. It still is important, probably, in fact, more important today, as you all know as students. We see in our every one of our projects, and that is that we are constantly aware of and integrating and considering so much more than just our piece. So much more than just the architecture, from my point of view. So that's all in terms of the value of this program and the value of thinking from an integrated fashion, integrated methods. When I graduated in '81, I went into lighting design. So my first 5 years were in New York, and I actually did electrical engineering. That was the very first thing I did for about a year and a half. And I started to do lighting design, and then pretty quickly, that's all I was doing was lighting. So we had a less formalized path at that time for lighting design than I think you do now. I think it's more clear today. But I went into lighting because I felt like lighting design for me was going to be the way to get to architecture. Basically, that was like, I had this story I kept repeating to anybody who'd listen. I want to be an architect, and I'm going to get there somehow or other. And so after 5 years of doing that in New York, I left that firm and went to another firm where, in fact, I did practice architecture. And wisely, my bosses said, so here's how you're going to do this. We're going to start you in construction administration, and see how that goes. If it goes well, you'll get to do more. So I actually went out to job sites. Of my first year and a half or 2 years there was going to project sites, roll of drawings, a book of specifications in my hand, and working with contractors to to see these projects get built and help through the process. So of course that was annoying for me in my 20s, thinking I want to do something else, right? I want to design, but it was brilliant by my bosses because I learned how to read the drawings, how to interpret them, how to work with people, how to work under pressure, and how to solve problems in construction, as it's getting built. So that was really critical for me to do, and obviously so helpful. Had I gone what I thought was the right path in 1975 and 76 and gone straight architecture, I might have taken a more theoretical path, more design, focused path, and I wouldn't have had all that experience. So really the first, 5 years of college, 5 years lighting, and then 5 or so years of doing CA to production to design was phenomenal. So 15 years in from starting college, I felt like I had a lot of really good experience. So I was pretty confident, I guess, of myself. I started to practice, and that was great. I did it for about 8-9 years. Did a variety of project types. Grew out of a really crappy economy, which, as you will all see, I'm sure, as you get out there, that the economy goes in cycles, or something like cycles, goes up and down. We have times where there's a lot of work and times where there's little work, and so I was able to see through some of those cycles. And then when I started my practice, I was we were all kind of coming up out of the bottom of a pretty deep well of banking crisis and other things that were going on at that time. So it was great for me because I started to practice when the economy was beginning to improve. All I needed was a project or 2 or 3, and things would get better, and they did. And so from there, I did that for 9 years. I then decided that it was time to go into a larger firm, and went to a large engineering firm, which frankly, I highly recommend, whether this is a conversation about architecture or engineering or what. The size of the firms that I've been with have really been great too. So been with small firms. This engineering firm I went into was about 10,000 people, and there was all of the building engineering going on there. There was also all kinds of other engineering, and there was planning, and there was land planning, and our actually little piece of architecture. Not very big, but in 10,000 people, you didn't have to be too big, really, to be kind of relatively big. So we had about maybe 200 or 300 architects around the U.S., and that was pretty good size, actually. So we did a whole variety of project types. And we started to do waterfront work, which was a passion I began to develop, and cruise terminals in particular. So that's maybe a long way to come around to saying that's why I sent you this piece that has all these waterfront projects in it. There's a reason, because I actually found that the waterfront work touched all of the parts of projects and architecture and development as a whole in ways that were really important to me. And particularly by that, I mean, and I'll get into it more, particularly I mean that our environment, certainly has been shifting, changing over time. It was changing when I started to do this work, like in early 2000, so 20 years ago. I worked on a cruise terminal designed for the Port of Jacksonville. It was the first one that they were going to have. It was one of not too many at that time in Florida. We were figuring out how to do it. Fast forward to today, through a lot of these projects, our water levels have been rising, the environments are changing, and everything about our coastlines are a really dynamic environment in terms of how we're dealing with climate change. So for me, the waterfront work has always had a great value. I still do waterfront work to this day, and really enjoy it. So after leaving that firm that was called CH2M Hill, Great firm, and as for all of you, I mean, I think it's a great possibility if you're looking for a large firm to be in. The firm I went to after that is called AECOM, and AECOM is an even larger one. There are 55,000 people. We were part of a studio of about 3,000 architects and interior designers and landscape architects around the world, and that gave me even greater opportunity to work on projects that were very large or complicated or both. First project I got to do for them was finishing up the Los Angeles Police Department headquarters, which is a huge, a huge project, largest building that the city of Los Angeles had done in a long time. And it was completed about 50 years to the day from the time they had built their last police headquarters. So that was really a controversial project, great to work on, get to know the city of Los Angeles, get to know large contractors, and again, kind of understanding how the construction world works when you're under pressures and solving problems, and dealing with a lot of issues, but retaining the design quality. In the middle of that project, we had to go from silver lead to something higher. So in the middle of construction, the mayor of LA, Antonio Villaraigosa, had a goal which he put out. He said, every building in the city of LA from this point forward, under my term, is going to be LEED silver or higher. And any project that's currently underway, you need to be higher than where you were. So we were under contract to be LEED silver, and we said, well, we're in construction. How you know, that's a big challenge you set out for us. We ended up LEED gold, and we did that by looking at every opportunity we could in the midst of the construction process and seeing where we could get more points. And so we succeeded with that. So that was the first project with AECOM. Went on to do a lot of other projects with them, and left there in 2011 and began the practice I have now, which is called MCTIGUE, as a way to build on top of all this various projects types I've worked on. People have come to know, the ability to team with people, which I think is, as I'm sure you all see as students where you are, that teaming with people is really important. It's critical as you're out there in the working world, and it's critical, I think, to know that there are times where you don't know something, but somebody else does, or somebody has a great idea. You might think that you know more than they do, and maybe you do, but they have the great idea. So so listen and incorporate those approaches into what you're doing. So the small firms taught me a lot. The large firms taught me a lot. And the last 9 years, I've been putting it to work in new ways. So that's a kind of a quickie of brings things to today for me. I will tell you one other piece along the way for me was that I had been doing sustainable projects really kind of all the way along. In the 80s, we talked about energy, and so that was our version of sustainability. Then was more conservation of resources than anything else. So energy was the big issue. When we looked at a project at that time in the 80s or 90s, we said maybe there are utility rebates we can get. So let's be smart about how we design. And maybe we can be more careful about the off-gassing of materials. But we didn't really have too much else more to go on in terms of ways to score, ways to evaluate, and to judge the work that we're doing. The world of the supplier network, the world of materials and systems was not nearly as highly developed as it is today. So the access we had to, good products, we were still using oil-based paints, for instance. And so our off-gassing of that kind of paint was such you'd say, okay, we're going to start painting this interior space, nobody would want to be in there during the entire painting cycle of a project. So you can imagine that means everything else had to stop. You couldn't be laying tile, you couldn't be putting light fixtures in, because it was just not good quality air to breathe. So so sustainability was a sort of piecemeal issue that we were dealing with, knowing that it was important, but we were really evolving. I was part of the American Institute of Architects Committee on the Environment for a while, and we began to talk about the kind of integrative process of what sustainability could mean. We're starting to use the term sustainability and define what that meant. We were beginning to look at other parallels for how we look at, from a systems point of view, things like issues and the issue of sustainability. And one of them is we can look at nature, and so biophilia and biomimicry. Those were some of the early terms that we were beginning to get in the 90s and early 2000s. We began to really understand there's more to this, than just a sort of myopic or piecewise approach to it. We need to think about this all together. We need to take the holistic approach. We need to think about the virtuous approach of working together, different materials, systems, methodologies, looking at needs from again, integrative, as opposed to a vicious cycle, sort of the downward cycle of doing things that are causing problems. We needed to look at it from a virtuous point of view, a virtuous cycle, which is that when you begin to put good ideas together and sustainable ideas together, and ideas that are, let's say, based more in nature, you begin to see things in a larger system, which brings you other outcomes that maybe you hadn't planned on. So now, and there are lots of different ways to score, and maybe if you like, I can talk through scoring in different methods. But the core of it, big picture, is we're really looking at this work from the point of view of what is the whole, what is the potential for the whole, and what are the aspects of a project, program, and needs, goals, influences that can create that project, but in many ways create a better project than just the program of the building itself. So in your particular example with this building you're looking at, you have a building type, and it's pretty clear. Lots of there are lots of museums, and there are lots of things you can study. Very, plenty of practical examples. So that part of programming I'm not touching on, because that's not why I'm here, I think, today. But the important part that I hope to share, and maybe you're already thinking, is what are the other influences on the project that will help that program, help the result, because you considered it, and how did you come to consider it? So it's thinking about how information comes in, where you're getting it, and what you keep on your plate and what you discard. So today, that's the way we're designing, or certainly trying to with every project. About a year and a half ago, or coming up on 2 years ago, I began to use some terminology which has more and more taken hold today, where we really look at the, essentially respecting life and respecting society and respecting our environment, and letting project economics and other practical factors come from that. So again, from that point of view of the big picture way of looking at how we design, if you've heard this term, the three legs of the stool, economy, society, and the environment, if we put society or social issues first and our environment alongside that, the economics follow. And when I talk to clients today, many of them, almost all of our commercial clients, are bottom line concerned. They want to make sure that they can build that building, of course, so it has to be constructible, but it has to fit their budget. And obviously with your museum, you know, there's budgetary constraints for a museum, just as there is with any project. But if we look at the economics of a project first, and we drive that, which is what a lot of, in my experience, a lot of developers tend to do. How much will this cost? Or how little can I spend to get something? We will never get to what the project can be. So if we flip that over and say, what does the project want to be? What should it be? What can it be? And how can it serve people and support the environment? We will get to good economics. We're not going to, we're not going to design a project that is over its schedule and over its budget. We're not going to do that. And so if we design a good building and it's intended to last and it works well for its current uses and its future uses, then it's got economic drivers already in place. And so today, what I call conscious architecture is a way of working with private owners, and including developers, public entities, to look at those first two aspects of this, the first two legs of the stool, as a way to help them be financially successful also. So there are some people we don't work with who actually still drive forward for the economics first, and really don't care. And they'll say, I don't care how quickly and how cheaply can we build this. And we say, well, we're not right for you in that case. So they're out there, of course. But we look for those projects where we can actually do so much more. There's a quote, living building challenge, which I think is one of the factors you're looking at for the museum. And that's socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative. And, nothing said money there, but everything says money there. Everything says it's not going to do, it's not going to be rich or just or restorative if it isn't also economically sound and if it isn't constructible. So, so those are just maybe some platitudes to be incorporating and thinking about. I know you're in the early phase of the project that you're looking at. I know that you're getting to know the site, and I think you're right now, Ross, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you're really beginning to look at program of the project.